Okay. My name is Prince Sa, University of Minnesota. Your name is? What's your name?
John is my English American name. I'll introduce myself. Bonjour, Ginoa.
Bonjour.
Ginyo Gichidan Nishanakaz. Magazine do de. Gichonagaming Minoa Mishkwabi a Kang Unjaba. So I just said hello to you.
Okay.
And then I gave you my spirit name, which is Ginyo Gichida, which means eagle warrior.
Okay. And you have?
I come from the Migizi Dodem, the Eagle clan.
Okay.
And then where I come from is Gichonagaming, it's Grand Portage.
Okay.
That's where my mother was from, but my father was from another nation called Mishkwabiakon, which is, they call it Red Cliff in English, over in Wisconsin. So that's who I am.
Okay.
And my English American name is John Morrin.
Okay. And how many spirit names do you have?
Just one.
Just one? Okay. We learned about spirit names and we learned how they're used for healing and stuff. So the more spirit name you have, the more you've been through.
Yeah,
so,
well, it don't matter if you have 1 or 10 or whatever, just depending on if somebody wants to give you another one. But actually, what it does is see, all of creation has a spirit.
Okay.
Everything the Creator created has a spirit. So now, when we get a spirit name when we're real young, about 4 or 5 months old, then what that does is that connects our spirit to all of the spirits of creation. Okay. So we're connected. So all the other spirits of creation know me by that name.
Okay.
You know,
spirit. Tying into the whole spirit thing, what animals do you guys prize? I know there's some other tribes that they prize the buffalo. Yeah. They see them as very sacred in a way, in a sense.
Well, our clan is usually an animal. Okay. So amongst and we're called Anishinaabe. Okay. Human beings. Okay. And so we were given a clan system thousands of years ago, and to remind us of our relationship. The four-leggeds, the swimmers, the winged, because they can help us. Their spirits help us. The spirit of the bear is a clan. Has a lot of the strongest medicines that we use for healing. There were chief clans, the loon and the crane, and then there was fish clans, intellectual psychologists of society. Then there were bird clans, the eagle, and then there were, of course, the hoofed clans, deer, caribou, elk, buffalo. And then there were the Martin clan, which is equivalent to a warrior society. And then the bear clan, and seven major clans that we were instructed, and then that's where we came from.
And is there any specific clan that you are?
Migizi Dodem, the Eagle clan.
The Eagle clan, okay. So our professor, he's called the Eagle Run, or that's his tribal name or something, the tribal name. And he said that's because he will never learn how to fly. He uses it kind of as a joke. Okay. So anything you would want to share about your whole tribe of the Grand Portage? Anything that you would like the class to know about you guys? We'll get into more detailed questions later on, but anything off the top you just want to share about Grand Portage?
Well, it was our ancestors. We got there thousands of years ago. We left a place called Boiting, which today is called Sault Ste. Marie. We had made a sacred migration thousands of years ago from the east coast into the Great Lakes area. And so our ancestors came to Grand Portage. Some went in the northern part of they call it Lake Superior. Yes. We call it Gitchagami, the Great Water. And so in a place called Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan today, the clans, some went south into Michigan, Wisconsin, what would become Wisconsin, Minnesota, all the way up to Turtle Mountains of North Dakota, and some went north. Clans left that place and went north. And so when my ancestors of my mother were the people that went north, and my ancestors of my father are the clans that went south into Wisconsin. And so that was thousands of years ago. And one day, And so in 1854, like many other areas in the country, there was a treaty with our chiefs.
Okay.
And that was in 1854. And that's where the present day, what they call, the government calls a reservation.
Yes.
To us, it's our homelands that were set aside by treaty that we would have forever.
Not to cut you off, what is that treaty name?
The 1854.
The 1854 treaty. Okay. We had that.
With the Lake Superior Chippewa, they called us.
Okay.
Which it also included other areas. The Boy Fort Reservation, the Fond du Lac. That's when they were all established over in Wisconsin, Red Cliff, Bad River, Lac de Flambeau, Le Coudray. Those were all created, and then there were others in Michigan that were also part of the. And then all of our ancestors met at a place called Madeline Island. Okay. That's where the treaty was agreed to. The present-day lands of Grand Portage. Then it was 56,000 acres. And it's right at that today.
Tip of Minnesota.
Tip of
border.
Grand Portage.
Okay. Got it.
See, that was created in 1854. Minnesota was just a territory. Minnesota didn't become a state till 1858.
Yeah.
So actually Minnesota stops at a place called Reservation River, which is our eastern boundary of the 1854 treaty. That's where Minnesota stops, although they do have lands, some lands within the reservation because of the Allotment Act. In Minnesota, of course, you might have learned about the Nelson Act of 1889.
Yes.
Okay, and that was
Nelson allotment, and we also learned about some few other more acts. Okay. So, how long have you been serving on the tribal council?
16 years.
16 years.
And I'm in my fifth term.
Fifth term. Okay. Yeah. And how is the election process conducted?
Well, it's in 1936, after, I'm sure you learned the Indian Organization Act.
Yes.
In 1934. Well, in Minnesota, excluding the Red Lake Reservation, the other six, which are Boy Fort, Leech Lake, Mille Lacs, Grand Portage, Fond du Lac, and White Earth, they created something called the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. Okay. And so we were all under one constitution, all five of these. Yeah. Reservations were under, and then in '63 when they revised it, they kept the Minnesota Chippewa tribe structure and kept the tribal executive committee, but then created other governments on the six reservations. Prior to 1963, the only government was the tribal executive committee out of Cass Lake, of two representatives from each reservation. And you probably learned this, but I'm just going over it again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fabulous that you know all this.
And so, well, we should know it's our history. Okay. So I'm an oral historian. So and so then at that time, then they created governments on the six reservations, but we're still part of a uniform tribal constitution. Okay. And so our elections are conducted not from each individual reservation, but voting takes place. Okay. But an election ordinance is passed at the tribal executive committee level, which are the chairman and the secretary treasurer from each of the six reservations. Okay. That's where so it's a uniform election process. So we all get elected at the same time of the year. They're staggered every 2 years. There's a tribal election. And some years 2 people get elected, and then the other 3. So it's staggered like that. And then of course there's you can vote on the reservation, but they also, some of the larger reservations have polling places off the reservation in the Twin Cities, in Duluth. And then also people can vote absentee ballot. So people who have never lived on Grand Portage, and probably will never live on Grand Portage, they live in California, Washington, Florida, they can vote in the elections by what is called an absentee ballot.
But they would have to have some type of lineage towards Grand Portage?
Well, they have to be enrolled. The only way you can vote is to be enrolled and be 18 years old.
Okay. And what is the enrollment process or requirements?
Well, in 1963, in our Constitution, now you have to be a quarter degree.
Okay, a quarter degree.
You have to have at least a quarter degree of Minnesota Chippewa tribe blood, of blood just between the 6 reservations, excluding Red Lake again. They were never allotted, so
they never.
weren't consolidated, and they had a kind of a hereditary type of government system before the Indian Reorganization Act. And so, what was the question again?
The question was just about the requirement, and you already
yeah,
answered
you
that.
have to be at least 18, live on the reservation.
Okay.
You have to have lived on the reservation for at least a year.
Okay.
And you can't have been convicted of any felony.
Okay.
And then that's the criteria for running for the tribal council.
That's nice. That's nice. That's nice. Okay, my next,
and be enrolled in the reservation where you're running.
Okay, got it. My next question pertains to the whole treaty, and the treaty that you guys made with the American government or the whites,
United States government.
The United States government. Is there any? I know you talked about the other treaties. You talked about some of them already, and I know some of them were not in your favor, and they still aren't in your favor. But is there any particular treaty that you would say that you're still, up to now, you're still fighting about, where it's like it's written that we should have this, but we don't have this, where you're still kind of fighting for something in any of the treaties?
Well, I think if anything, if there's any land losses yet that occurred after the treaty was made, those would be land claims.
Okay.
But as far as the, and of course you know that of the approximately 371 treaties that the United States government made with all of the tribal nations, they never kept one. They broke every one of them. Okay. So that kind of gives you an idea of the mindset of the United States government in relationship to us.
Okay.
And so there are, within Grand Portage, one of my questions is they say we ceded something called, it's a big island called Isle Royal.
Okay.
And it's questionable whether our ancestors really understood, because you're talking about two people coming together, different languages, and there's many words in our language that you can't translate into the English language. There's no thought. There's no worldview. Okay. Because what you're talking about, two languages, and they have different worldviews.
Not everything translates.
No, because of a worldview.
Okay.
In English, they got a different worldview relationship to Mother Earth. Okay. In our language, it's a spiritual relationship. Mm-hmm. In English, it can be a scientific relationship. Yeah. Uh-huh. That's not spiritual.
Got it.
That's just separate. Human beings academically using their minds to create things or create structures and all that. So there's many. So treaties are very. There's been the case law still is that if there's any ambiguity in. If there's any ambiguous language in a treaty, it should be, at least I believe the federal courts are still going to acknowledge that it should be interpreted the way we would have understood it. Oh, okay. Regardless of how, when they wrote the treaty down in English, and the words they use, like we ceded, we conveyed. Okay. See, those are words that we don't have in our language. Okay. Because you can't convey or sell Mother Earth. Okay. We don't have no right. Okay. Even as sovereign nations, we don't have the right to sell the earth. That's our mother. Okay. So that's like slavery then. Yes. Condoning slavery if you sell a piece of your mother, but that a lot of language came down in the treaties in the English language that I'm sure our ancestors didn't agree to or didn't understand. But and then we're kind of set up in the federal court system now, especially with the conservative thinking of the United States Supreme Court. Tribes have lost 23 out of the last 29 cases that the Supreme Court heard. So that's not our place to go. Okay. They slowly, every time we go in there, and there was a favorable decision recently in the Michigan case where the Supreme Court upheld our sovereign immunity, that states can't sue us without our permission. Okay. So that was a good case, but there haven't been too many
too many
in the last 20 years that have come out in our favor. Okay. So it's a very dangerous place to go.
Got it.
And especially if you try to question things in the treaty. It's very difficult the way they're going to...
The language and the perspective mostly.
And how the courts are going to rule.
Okay.
Like they have in the past, they'll make up stuff. That's what they've done. That's how they've set us up as tribes, where we're called quasi-sovereign, or domestic dependent nations.
Okay. Got it.
In earlier Supreme Court, I don't know if your instructor went over the Marshall case.
Yes, we did. We watched
Cherokee versus Johnson versus McIntosh, Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, and Worcester.
Yeah, we went
three
over
three cases that would be the cases that from there they would develop what they call federal Indian law, which is a setup. Because within federal Indian law, courts have also upheld the right of plenary power. That our relation is a political relationship, this trust relationship, and that Congress then can pass any laws. We can oppose them, but unless we're able to lobby the full Congress to not pass a law that's detrimental to us, they can pass it anyways. And if they pass a law and we still don't agree with it, we can't go into the federal court system and challenge it. Because it's not a legal matter. It's a political matter. So in other words, they can pass any piece of legislation about us, for us, and then we got our own, of course, Title 25. We got our own statute that all American Indian law is within those statute books, and that's called federal Indian law. So there's plenary power. We can't challenge any of the legislation successfully. So in other words, that's dominant. The United States government is still dominant over all of the so-called, but treaties, are still important. They're still the supreme law. It still keeps our boundaries intact. Even though, I don't know if you went over the termination period in the 1950s.
Yes, we've gone over several.
Where they've terminated about 109 reservations at that time. So we've been through that type of historical relationship with the United States, and so it's still very tenuous, our relationship. It's not. But what forums we have to challenge any injustice is very limited to us within the confines of the federal court system or the legislative system or even the executive system. Are still really hard to maneuver and challenge anything. So
my next question pertains to we just talked about allotment of the land and things like that. I don't know if you can picture a picture of where your reservation is on a map or so, but where would you say the boundary should be at? If you guys got your way and through all the court cases, through the right treaties and stuff, where would you say this is our right of land, this is where we should be at, this is how large our reservation should be?
From the one established in 1854, I mean, we made a treaty. And we can't say that because our ancestors, whether they totally understood the conversation or the discussion that went on, that's what they set aside for us in 1854, and that was agreed to. We can't find any other evidence that it wasn't agreed to, based on the understanding of our chiefs that were making that decision, and our headmen that were headmen were the spiritual advisors to the chiefs. Every leader had a spiritual advisor. So that's our homeland, unfortunately. We can't go outside because we agreed to it. And we keep our word. So, and there's no place in any court system other than possibly the World Court, which we're also cut off from that by the United States and the Security Council and the General Assembly. That's our homeland. That's what we got left, based on what we had prior to 1854. So we can't challenge to say our reservation should be any bigger.
So you don't have any personal conviction that says deep down in my heart, this is what we wrote. We're gonna keep our word. But I would like to see our land, maybe, not talking from the council tribe perspective, but more of a personal perspective, saying, well, this is where I think we should be at.
When I talk from, even though I'm on the tribal council,
okay,
my perspective doesn't change even as an individual, personal.
Got it.
It's all rolled in.
Okay.
It's all one. It's who I am.
You're not the typical American politic.
No.
Yes. Okay.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
Got it.
No, I've never thought about that, about it being any larger. Because what we got left, if you ever come up there someday, you're going to see how beautiful it is. 56,000 acres, and we probably got about 9. They allotted 6,000 and homesteaded another 16,000 they allotted, and they homesteaded 12,000.
Okay.
There was an aspect of the Nelson Act that said, see, that was to assimilate us, right?
Okay, yeah.
Turn us into small-scale farmers, whatever, and assimilate us into a dominant society. That we'd forget who we were, and then we'd just become American citizens versus being what they called us, American Indians.
Okay.
So the whole idea was to blend us into society. So in the law, it said any surplus lands,
yes,
the federal government would buy up.
Okay.
And then this money was supposed to be deposited in a big fund for all 6 reservations and members of all 6 reservations. And then they would buy that up, and so they did. And then they homesteaded it to non-tribal members for $1. Okay. So it's basically on a homeland that was set aside by, and what the courts will say is the Nelson Act superseded the treaty, which, come on, it's in Article 6 of the Constitution, it's the supreme law of the land, and they will still say that, at least as far as the boundaries, even though there have been court cases where they say Congress can abrogate the treaties with us.
Okay.
I mean, that's that. And they just gave themselves that power. Okay. We didn't give them that power. They just made it up, to control us as tribal people. And so 12,000 acres. So there were little white towns on the mini reservations, groups of white people who got basically free land from the federal government, and they came in, and I guess they were supposed to be the models. We're supposed to say, oh, that's how we're supposed to be. Okay. Like these white people living up in Mineral Center or up by the border, and so many times the people never even seen their allotment. Okay.
Yeah, we read stories about things like that.
Give you a piece of paper, it's called a trust patent, saying you 80 acres. Well, you don't understand that. Okay. Maybe some did if they knew some English and somebody translated it to and say you can go live over here now. I don't know how it worked. And so, anyways, we've got now back about 98% of our original land base.
That's good. That's
due to gaming, we spent millions buying up parcels of land, of many times from people who have it in fee land, non-tribal people who own land. We've paid millions to, so we almost got all of it, our land base back, our original land base from the treaty, which means jurisdiction. Legally means we have a say over it now. Under the guidance of course, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who is still our trustee, trust us, like historically. Never been able to trust them. I don't think we still can trust them, but they're in control based on the structure of the United States government with this trust relationship, government to government, dominant United States government to quasi-sovereign, domestic dependent nation governments. That's the attitude of the political system within the United States yet, political and legal systems within the United States. And it's a setup where we're still controlled. Even in 2014, they still got control mechanisms in place, how they control us as a people. And so really our only course in the future, now and in the future, is to be recognized within the other nations of the world. But unfortunately, the United States is one of the 5 that have veto power, and last time tribes went to the United Nations to go and speak and be recognized, this was in 1949 when they were creating the United Nations, and the United States government vetoed letting us come in. But we're still working on it with the Declaration on Indigenous Rights that was passed in 2009, even though it's very vague language, and they're still working, they're still defining what indigenous means. And of course, the United States is still in there trying to define it, that they're still dominant over us. We can't be totally free to.
Got it. One last question on land and geography of you guys. Has the U.S. government or anybody called you guys or asked about using your land for anything? Yesterday we learned about a tribe. I think it's called the Perry Lake tribe.
Prairie Lake. Where are they at?
They're somewhere in Minnesota, I think down south.
Oh, Prairie Island.
Yeah, Perry Island. Yeah, and we heard some shocking news that they had a nuclear plant
right 650
there.
yards.
Yes, 150 yards. So has anything like that been placed on your property, on your land, or has anybody from the U.S. government contacted you guys like, hey, we'll pay you this some amount of money for something of that nature?
Yeah. No. Well, they've tried to come and do mineral explorations years ago, and we wouldn't let them do that. A lot of the lands that the Bureau bought for us after the Indian Reorganization Act, and lands we still retain. There's a box on the paper that if the people who they're buying the land from, if they're people, corporations, whatever, who acquired the land somehow after the Nelson Act, they can still retain mineral rights. So in other words, if we get the land, we got the surface rights, but and families, corporations, state, government, who got tax forfeited lands after the Nelson Act, from the homesteads during the Depression and other time, still have mineral rights. And so a family did come to us a number of years ago, I'd say about 10 years ago, and they have some mineral rights on one of our lands. And they wanted to sell it back to us, the mineral rights, for $12 million. And we basically said, no, we're not going to pay you $12 million for the mineral rights. Well, we're not going to let you mine either. So we got what we call a land use ordinance, which the federal government gives tribes a status equivalent to states, as far as passing ordinance like zoning, things like that. We have our own land use ordinance, and on there we have that because reservation is divided by the Pigeon River, which is on the other side of the Pigeon River is Canada, is Ontario, and then on this side is Reservation River is the boundary that goes up to the Pigeon River and then back into Lake Superior, and then the other boundary is Lake Superior. So we're unique because we're probably the only reservation in the United States that is surrounded by water. Our boundaries are water. And that's a uniqueness of Grand Portage. And so in our ordinance we put in there that there can be no mining within a half mile or less between any waters.
So there's no.
So we got a lot of streams coming to the reservation, of course. Off the Pigeon River, go through all of our lands. We've got islands that people have mineral rights on, and so based on our land use ordinance, which they would have to, unless they change the rules, uphold our right to regulate any type of activity within our land use ordinance, and a lot of it's cultural. Most of our northern part is culturally preserved for hunting, fishing, the lakes to fish, so our people can continue to do sustenance living, hunting and fishing. And then, so it would be impossible for any family, corporation, to come into Grand Portage and try to extract the minerals from the mineral rights underneath our land.
Okay.
Because it would be violating our land use. So we protected the reservation from mining.
Okay.
And that, you know, we would be able to fight that in federal court.
Got it.
And so that's what when we're leaving, of course, that for the future generations. So, so those types of things that about the mineral won't allow them to do.
Okay.
So we're protecting we can protect our land. That's sovereignty.
Okay.
You know, and of course they're probably sorry they let us do it, but too bad.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it for the first session.